that position. What would never obviously have happened if I had not been on mat leave and had been male. So those two things often go together, I find. And so that's my story. I think the lesson there is, now I'm recalling again what Sheryl Sandberg said. So I have recently watched the Sheryl Sandberg TED Talk, and she had been talking about that the quote that she uses for this type of story, the headliner would be, "Don't leave until you leave," which means that make sure that people understand what you want for your development, and if you want to move ahead, make sure that that is known at all points in your own life cycle, in your own journey, including when you're working, when you're not working, when you're pregnant, when you're not pregnant. And all of these things, I think it's sometimes unfortunate that we have to think of those things as women, but it is true. And in that manner, you need to be overt with what it is that you want in your career.
Thank you. Great story, Nancy.
Yeah, I really haven't had, any sort of ground-shattering, earth-shattering types of incidences, if you will. The closest, as I listen to your stories, that I can, situation that I can think perhaps it was, gender-related, but probably more so because I am very overt by nature, and most people respond quite well to that, and my negotiation style and things that we'll talk about is one that's very direct, and what I've worked on over the years is to soften that a bit, if you will, and the one situation where perhaps this individual would have reacted differently had I been a man was when it's one of our senior leaders in the head of our commercial operations group, when he first started in his role, around the time that I took on the current role that I'm in at Luminex, and came one day to Toronto, and he and my boss, who's now the global head of R&D for Luminex, he had to tell me that they were letting go of one of the people in the global marketing group, and just so that I could manage the reaction with the Toronto group. He was based in Toronto around that. And I recognized that it was something that we sort of saw coming, but I thought as this was a meeting, sort of just the three of us behind closed doors, where then I proceeded to talk about, okay, and then what next, and he had just taken on the role and recognized that he needed to do some restructuring in general in the group, and to build it up. As a growth company, you're constantly kind of tweaking. As the company grows, you've got to tweak the way your operations run to keep up with that, so that the growth is sustainable. And so when I launched in a very overt and direct way, and expressed my opinions in his group, because I worked very closely with that group, what other areas of improvement there were, what I felt needed to be done to help us get to the next stage. I was very passionate about it and very direct about it, and at one point my boss then had to say, okay, no, Mike gets that, but it'll take time, to be able to implement all of those changes, and they've since been implemented, and I just think of Mike's reaction to my reaction, and thought, had I maybe that kind of overt approach to things, maybe it would have been a different response had I been a man, but I'm not really sure, I guess, is at the end of the day, and I think sometimes that very direct approach works, and there are situations where you need to apply it, and sometimes it's more of an internal sell, if you will, and a different type of negotiation, but that's the closest I can, recount. So.
Great. So Eileen, you mentioned Sheryl Sandberg, the CEO of Facebook. She gave a TED Talk, and she wrote a book called Lean In. Some of you may be familiar, and there she specifically examines why women's progress in achieving leadership roles is so slow. One of the root causes that she talks about in her book and during the talk is actually gender related, where she says that success and likability are positively correlated in men, and they're negatively correlated in women. and she has a son and a daughter. She says that she wants her daughter to have the choice in life to not just succeed, but to be liked for her accomplishments. So